Millionaire divorced his pregnant wife. Then 12 Black Rolls-Royces arrived. Take her home. Disclaimer. This fictional story is created solely for entertainment. All characters, companies, estates, legal disputes, and events are invented. Any resemblance to real people, businesses, or circumstances is coincidental. Legal, financial, and medical details are dramatized for narrative purposes and are not professional advice. At 10:07 on a gray Manhattan morning, Claire Whitmore became divorced, 7 months pregnant, carrying one suitcase, and still refusing to tell Ethan who her family really was. Before the morning ended, 12 Black Rolls-Royces would stop outside the courthouse, but the cars were not the reason he lost her. As you listen, decide this. If someone abandoned you when you were most vulnerable, would you reveal everything or leave with your dignity intact? Tell us which choice you would make. Now, the notice arrives. The notice arrived just after 10. A justice of the New York State Supreme Court had signed the judgment of divorce after reviewing the couple's settlement, and the judgment had been entered with the county clerk. Claire Whitmore and Ethan Calloway were at the courthouse with their attorneys to finish the final practical details and receive copies of the papers that ended their 3-year marriage. Claire stood near a tall window in a quiet conference room, both hands resting over the curve of her 7-month pregnancy. Her cream maternity dress was simple, her navy coat folded over one arm. On the table beside her sat a modest leather handbag and a single suitcase. Across the room, Ethan closed his copy of the judgment. At 36, he was the celebrated founder of Callaway Technologies, a company now worth far more than either of them had imagined when they first met. His charcoal suit was immaculate. His expression was controlled. He looked like a man leaving a successful negotiation. Michael Brennan, his attorney, spoke first. The judgment is entered. The property settlement is effective according to its terms, and the agreed pregnancy-related medical expenses remain covered. Any parentage, parenting time, or child support questions that arise after the baby is born will be handled through the proper legal process. Claire's attorney nodded. Every major financial term had been reviewed. No one had signed under pressure. No dramatic surprise clause had appeared at the last moment. Their marriage was simply over. Ethan glanced at Claire's stomach. Their daughter moved beneath the fabric. For 1 second, regret crossed his face. Then pride covered it. I told the leasing office you can stay in the apartment for another 60 days, he said. That should give you enough time to make arrangements. Claire looked at him. He still thought she needed his permission to land safely. Thank you, she said. 2 words. No accusation. No plea. No threat that he would regret leaving her. Ethan frowned. Her calm unsettled him more than anger would have. That's all. Claire picked up her handbag. What would you like me to say? I don't know. Something. She studied the man she had once loved enough to build a life around. I hope one day you find what you were looking for. His jaw tightened, as if kindness were more difficult to receive than blame. Claire turned to her attorney, thanked her, and walked out. Outside, autumn wind moved through lower Manhattan. Taxis edged through traffic. Courthouse workers hurried along the sidewalk. No one had been given access to the confidential divorce file. A few business reporters covering an unrelated civil matter recognized Ethan as he emerged, and their cameras turned toward the familiar founder. Claire ignored them. She had asked no one to meet her at the courthouse. At least, that was what Ethan believed. He emerged several moments later with Michael and stopped beneath the stone steps. Claire stood near the curb with her suitcase. Then a black Rolls-Royce Phantom turned the corner. Its long body moved slowly through traffic and stopped several car lengths away. A second appeared behind it. Then a third. Pedestrians began to notice. By the time the 6th black Phantom entered the block, even Ethan looked away from his phone. Is there an event? Michael asked. Ethan did not answer. 7, 8, 9. The cars were identical in color, but not theatrical in their movement. No sirens cleared the street. No one blocked traffic. The drivers simply followed normal instructions from courthouse security and pulled into approved curb space as it became available. 10, 11. Then the 12th black Rolls-Royce arrived. 12 polished cars stretched along the block like a dark ribbon beneath the gray Manhattan sky. The first rear door opened. An elderly man stepped out wearing a dark wool coat and carrying a silver-topped cane. Arthur Hale had managed the Whitmore family office for more than 30 years. He had known Claire since she was a child who hid library books beneath the dining table and insisted She could saddle her own pony before she was tall enough to reach the stirrup. He crossed the sidewalk without looking at Ethan. "Miss Whitmore," he said. Claire's face changed for the first time that morning. "You came yourself." Arthur smiled. Some returns should not be delegated. He did not kneel or perform for the cameras. He simply reached for her suitcase, then stopped when she tightened her grip on it. "I can carry it," she said. "I know." That answer almost broke her. Arthur opened the rear door. Warm light fell across cream leather seats. A thermos of the ginger tea Claire had been drinking during pregnancy waited in the center console. A reporter called. "Ms. Whitmore, who are these people?" Another asked, "Are you related to Whitmore Holdings?" Claire said nothing. Ethan came down one step. "Claire." She turned. He was staring at the convoy now, then at Arthur, then back at the woman who had taken the subway, repaired second-hand furniture, compared grocery prices, and never once asked him for a designer handbag. "What's going on?" Claire rested one hand over her unborn daughter. "I'm going home." "Home where?" She held his eyes for a moment. Not cruelly, not triumphantly. "To my family." Arthur offered his arm. Claire accepted it because the wind had strengthened and the courthouse steps were uneven, not because she needed to be escorted like royalty. Before getting into the car, she looked back once. Ethan expected a final revelation. A family name. A number. A threat. Claire gave him none. The door closed. One by one, the 12 Black Rolls-Royces pulled away from the curb. Inside the lead car, Claire watched Manhattan slide past the tinted window. Arthur poured tea into a travel cup. "You do not have to be composed with me," he said. Her eyes filled immediately. "I am angry." "Good." Claire gave him a tired look. Arthur continued. "Anger tells us a boundary was crossed. It becomes dangerous only when we let it choose our character." She pressed the warm cup between her palms. "Part of me wanted to tell him in that room. I wanted to say the Whitmore name and watch his face change." "Why didn't you?" "Because then he would think the lesson was that he divorced a rich woman." Claire looked down as her daughter moved again. "That isn't the lesson. He lost his wife because he stopped respecting her long before he knew what she had." Arthur nodded. "Your grandfather would understand." The convoy crossed out of Manhattan without spectacle. Claire leaned back and let herself breathe. She was not returning home as a defeated wife. She was not returning as an heiress coming to punish a man. She was returning as a pregnant woman who needed safety, medical calm, honest advice, and time to decide what kind of mother she wanted to become. Arthur placed a slim folder beside her. "No press statement has been issued," he said. "Nothing will be released without your approval. The family office has also made no change to any investment connected to Ethan or his company." Claire looked at him. "Good. Your grandfather's letter is at the house." Her fingers tightened around the cup. "And the board?" "Waiting." "Let them wait until tomorrow." Arthur smiled faintly. "Your first decision back is to do nothing?" "My first decision back is to remember that I am a person before I am an asset." For the first time that day, Arthur laughed. Outside, the skyline began to disappear behind autumn trees. Claire closed her eyes. The hardest chapter had ended. The next one would not be written by anger. Some of life's most expensive mistakes are made in ordinary rooms, beside people whose loyalty has become invisible. As the phantom carried Claire away from Manhattan, memories returned with painful clarity. She had met Ethan 3 years earlier when Calloway Technologies occupied 2 cramped rooms above a Brooklyn coffee shop. The elevator failed, the desks were secondhand, and winter air slipped through the window frames. Ethan had little money, but he laughed easily and treated every employee as though the future already belonged to them. One evening, while Claire helped assemble office furniture, she asked, "Do you really believe this company will work?" "It has to. And if it doesn't?" He smiled. "Then we'll build another one." She fell in love with the man, not the ambition. 11 months later, they married in a small chapel outside Boston with 24 guests, homemade cake, and vows neither of them doubted. Claire did not reveal the scale of her family's wealth. She told Ethan that the Whitmores valued privacy and that family relationships were complicated. Both statements were true, but incomplete. Her grandfather had once advised her, "Let a man meet Claire before he meets the name." For 2 years, their life was happy. Claire cooked, proofread proposals, attended product demonstrations, and listened when Ethan's fear was too private for employees to see. When the company needed introductions, she quietly asked the Whitmore family office to identify independent investors who might consider the opportunity. Professionals conducted their own analysis. Committees made their own decisions. Claire neither guaranteed returns nor directed anyone to invest. Those introductions mattered. So did Ethan's work. His software solved real problems. His employees endured impossible weeks, and clients renewed because the product delivered. Claire never believed she had built the company for him. She believed she had helped the man she loved reach a fair starting line. Success arrived quickly. Calloway Technologies expanded into glass offices, international contracts, and a valuation approaching $200 million. At first, Ethan remained grateful. Then his schedule changed, followed by his habits, and finally his understanding of himself. The man who once thanked a barista for an extra cup began criticizing chauffeurs for arriving 2 minutes late. When Claire became pregnant, she wrapped the ultrasound photograph in a small box. Ethan's joy was real. He lifted her carefully, kissed her forehead, and spent an entire weekend discussing names. For several weeks, she believed the old Ethan had returned. Then Vanessa Brooks joined the company. Vanessa was polished, ambitious, and newly appointed as Ethan's executive assistant. She entered his calendar first, then his private meetings, then the hours he once protected for his wife. Claire noticed the new cologne, the late-night messages, and the way Ethan turned his phone face down whenever she entered the room. Still, she refused to accuse him without proof. The truth arrived at a children's hospital gala. Claire came after a prenatal appointment, hoping to surprise him. From a balcony above the ballroom, she saw Vanessa straighten Ethan's tie and leave her hand against his chest. Ethan did not move away. When a photographer asked whether Mrs. Calloway would join them, Vanessa smiled. Claire doesn't enjoy this world. Ethan glanced toward the cameras. She was wonderful when life was simple, but she doesn't understand what the company needs now. Claire followed them into a private corridor and heard Vanessa ask, "What happens after the baby?" Ethan answered quietly, "I'll take responsibility for my child. The marriage is another question." Claire stepped into view. Vanessa withdrew her hand. Ethan's face changed from surprise to irritation, as though Claire had interrupted a meeting rather than discovered a betrayal. "How long?" Claire asked. "This isn't the place," he replied. "Our home was the place. You simply stopped coming home." Vanessa left without being asked. Claire did not blame her for vows she had never made. Later, in the penthouse, Ethan admitted the relationship had become physical during a business trip. He apologized, then protected his pride with excuses. He said Claire had become distant. He said success had changed them. He said they no longer belonged in the same world. Claire reminded him that she had spent months attending medical appointments alone while he posed beside another woman. "I cannot keep apologizing for outgrowing the life we had," Ethan said. For one fierce moment, Claire wanted to reveal everything. She wanted to speak the Whitmore name and watch certainty leave his face. But money could expose ingratitude. It could not repair character. "Then I won't ask you to stay," she answered. The next morning, Ethan's lawyer sent a proposed divorce agreement. Claire retained independent counsel, rejected unfair provisions, and protected her rights without turning the process into spectacle. She also accepted an uncomfortable truth of her own. Keeping her identity hidden had created distance, but it had not caused Ethan to lie, cheat, or humiliate her. Each night, she placed a hand over her unborn daughter and made one promise. "Mommy may be hurt, but she will never teach you that love requires humiliation." That promise carried her to the courthouse and into the black car, now taking her home. People spend years believing wealth announces itself. Real power often arrives quietly. The 12-car convoy carried Claire north through autumn traffic, while journalists called and board members left messages she did not answer. 40 minutes later, the cars turned through the gates of Whitmore Manor, an old limestone estate surrounded by maples and a private lake. Claire had left the property at 24, determined to live without the shelter of the family name. Returning now did not feel like surrender. It felt like reaching a place where she could finally stop performing strength. Margaret, the housekeeper who had helped raise her, met her beneath the portico and wrapped her in both arms. "I missed you," Claire whispered. Margaret touched her face, then smiled at the curve of her pregnancy. "We missed both of you." Inside, Claire paused before the portrait of her grandfather, Edward Whitmore. Beneath every family portrait was the same small silver motto, "Character before fortune." Arthur handed her a sealed, ivory envelope. Claire recognized the handwriting immediately. "Grandpa, he asked me to give it to you if you ever came home because someone mistook your quietness for dependence." Claire broke the seal. The letter was brief. Her grandfather reminded her that wealth could reveal character but could never create it. One line had been underlined twice. "If the man you chose ever values your name more than your heart, do not use the name to punish him. Come home, tell the truth, and build something useful." Claire read it twice. Then she pressed the page against her chest and cried for the first time since the judgment had been entered. Arthur remained beside her without speaking. When the tears passed, Claire looked at her grandfather's portrait. "I tried." Arthur nodded. "He knew you would." By the following morning, Ethan's corner office looked unchanged, but the atmosphere inside it had shifted. Every financial network replayed the courthouse footage. Claire standing beside her suitcase, Arthur bowing, the line of black cars, and the unanswered question beneath the screen. Who is Claire Whitmore? Ethan muted the television. "This is gossip." His attorney, Michael Brennan, entered with a folder. Some of it is due diligence." Michael explained that legitimate due diligence searches found ordinary public biographical and business information about Claire, but almost nothing connecting her private life to the scale of Whitmore family wealth. The Whitmores operated through a private family office, trusts, charitable foundations, and closely held companies. Their privacy was unusual, but lawful. No secret government files. No mysterious erasures. Simply generations of professionals who understood the difference between required disclosure and private family life. Then Michael placed 3 investment reports on the table. Several funds that had backed Callaway Technologies had long-standing business relationships with Whitmore Holdings. Each fund had documented its own analysis and approved its investment independently. There was no evidence of fraud, secret ownership, or market manipulation. Ethan exhaled. "Then there is no problem." "There may be no legal problem," Michael said, "but there is a personal one. Investors are asking whether Claire introduced your company to people who otherwise would never have taken the meeting." Ethan remembered every unexpected second chance. A supplier who extended terms, a venture firm that reopened negotiations, a hospital network that agreed to pilot his software. He had done the work after those doors opened. His employees had built a real product. But someone had quietly made sure the doors were not locked before he arrived. That afternoon, the board convened a special governance meeting. Chairman William Harris did not accuse Ethan of misconduct. He spoke instead about disclosure, independence, and confidence. "We are commissioning an outside review," William said. "Not because we believe the company is illegitimate, but because our investors deserve a clear record of how early opportunities were developed." Ethan bristled. "I built this company." "You did," the chief financial officer replied. "And hundreds of employees helped. Claire may also have helped." Acknowledging that does not erase your work. The statement should have comforted him. Instead, it exposed the belief that had poisoned his marriage. If another person contributed to his success, he feared his own achievement became smaller. Across the table, one director asked the question Ethan had avoided. "Did your wife ever tell you she was making introductions?" "No." "Did you ever ask how she understood investors so well?" Ethan looked down. Claire had reviewed his presentations at midnight. She had warned him which terms would frighten institutional partners. She had predicted which board questions would come first. He had called it intuition because listening more carefully might have required him to respect expertise he had never bothered to investigate. The outside review took days, not hours. Its preliminary findings were reassuring. Callaway Technologies had earned its contracts. Its products worked. Its valuations had support. Claire had never directed a fund to invest, never demanded favorable terms, and never used confidential information improperly. She had made introductions through counsel and family office professionals, then stepped away from the decisions. The company would survive. Ethan's private story about himself would not. Meanwhile, at Whitmore Manor, Claire rejected every request for an interview. She did not want a public battle, a revenge tour, or a documentary about her marriage. When Arthur asked whether she wished the family office to withdraw from any investment connected to Ethan, she answered immediately. "Only if the professionals responsible conclude it is financially appropriate. Nothing changes because I am hurt." Arthur studied her. "That is a difficult distinction. It is a necessary one. Employees should not lose jobs because their founder failed his wife." Claire's anger had not vanished. At night, she sometimes woke furious that Ethan had enjoyed opportunities she helped create while treating her as an obstacle. She allowed herself to feel it. She spoke with a therapist recommended by her physician. She met with her attorney about future co-parenting, medical costs, and boundaries after the baby's birth. Dignity, she was learning, did not mean pretending pain was absent. It meant refusing to let pain make every decision. A week after the divorce, Whitmore Holdings announced that Claire would return as a board observer before assuming any permanent leadership role. The cautious process surprised reporters expecting a dramatic coronation. Claire insisted on training, conflict reviews, and independent evaluation. "I will not inherit credibility," she told the board. "I will earn it." The sentence reached Ethan through a business news clip. He watched it alone after midnight. On his desk stood an old photograph of Claire in their first apartment, flower on her cheek and laughter in her eyes. For years, he had believed she was ordinary because she never demanded attention. Now he understood that restraint had been one of her greatest strengths. He opened a draft statement prepared by his public relations team. It described him as a visionary founder unfairly caught in speculation. Ethan deleted it. Then he wrote a simpler version. Callaway Technologies was built by a team, supported by investors who conducted independent review, and strengthened in its earliest years by people whose contributions I did not adequately recognize. I have asked the board to complete its review and will cooperate fully. He did not name Claire. She had not given him permission. The statement calmed the market because it did not insult the public's intelligence. More important, it marked the first time Ethan had admitted that success was not a solo performance. But accountability in a press release was easier than accountability in a garden. 3 nights later, he found Claire's wedding ring in the inner pocket of the coat he had worn to court. She had removed it before the final hearing and left it with the signed property inventory. He placed the ring in a small velvet box. Several days later, Ethan asked Arthur whether Claire would see him. The answer came back with one condition. He could visit, but he could not discuss business, money, or reconciliation unless Claire chose to. Ethan drove to Whitmore Manor with her wedding ring in a velvet box beside him. The estate unsettled him less because of its size than because of how many clues he had ignored. Claire had once described long drives beneath old maple trees, a grandfather who believed money should create responsibility, and a childhood spent in libraries and stables. Ethan had heard the stories without ever becoming curious about the woman telling them. Arthur led him to a garden beside a reflecting pool. Claire stood there in a pale coat, one hand resting over her pregnancy. "Hello, Ethan. I didn't know," he said. "I know. You never told me." Claire looked toward the water. "I told you many things about myself. You heard the parts that fit the life you had already decided I came from." He winced. "I thought you trusted me. I trusted you with my heart." Her voice remained calm. "I was still deciding whether I could trust you with the part of my life that made people behave differently." Ethan opened the velvet box. "I kept your ring." Claire looked at it for several seconds, then gently closed the lid. "Keep it. Why?" "So you remember that the worst thing you did was not failing to recognize a wealthy family." She met his eyes. "It was failing to recognize your wife." He lowered his head. "I am sorry. I believe you are sorry." Hope moved across his face. Claire continued, "But remorse does not reverse a judgment, and it does not rebuild trust on demand." He nodded slowly. Arthur appeared at the far end of the path. "Miss Whitmore, the board is ready when you are." Claire turned to go, then paused. "There was a time I would have left all of this behind to grow old beside you," she said. "That was never the problem. The problem was that you stopped respecting the ordinary life we were building together." She walked back toward the house. Ethan remained beside the reflecting pool holding the closed ring box. For the first time, he understood that learning who Claire's family was had changed nothing important. He had already known the part of her that mattered. He simply had not valued it enough. The greatest revenge is rarely loud. Sometimes it is simply living the life someone else believed you never deserved. 3 months later, spring sunlight spilled through the nursery windows at Whitmore Manor. Claire sat in a rocking chair with her newborn daughter, Lily, asleep against her chest. The baby had arrived healthy after a carefully monitored delivery. For the first week, Claire wanted only quiet, recovery, and time to learn the small rhythms of a new life. Ethan did not appear at the hospital uninvited. He received notice through the agreed channel after Lily was born. He sent a short message through counsel, I am grateful they are both safe. Please tell Claire I will follow whatever process is best for Lily. That sentence mattered because it asked for nothing. 2 weeks later, Claire agreed to a brief visit at the Manor with Arthur nearby. Ethan entered the nursery without flowers, cameras, or a gift large enough to become a statement. He stopped several feet from Claire and looked at the child sleeping in her arms. "May I?" Claire waited, then nodded. He washed his hands and took Lily carefully. The millionaire who had once spoken as if every problem could be solved through control suddenly looked terrified by 8 pounds of sleeping responsibility. "Hello," he whispered. Lily opened her eyes for half a second, then closed them again. Ethan laughed through tears. Claire did not confuse tenderness with reconciliation, but she also refused to make their daughter carry the punishment for choices made before her birth. They worked through attorneys and a parenting professional to create a gradual schedule. Ethan learned that being a father was not a title he could announce. It was a pattern: arriving on time, listening to medical guidance, answering when the baby was sick, and respecting Claire's boundaries even when they disappointed him. At Callaway Technologies, the outside governance review concluded that the company was legitimate. Its products worked. Its investors had made independent decisions. Claire's family connections had opened several early doors, but no one found evidence that she had ordered investments, manipulated prices, or secretly controlled the business. Ethan kept his company. What he lost was the myth that he had built everything alone. He began naming the people he had once treated as background: engineers, assistants, early customers, investors. Claire, not in a sentimental speech, and never without her permission. In meetings, in board records, and in the way he stopped turning gratitude into weakness. Claire, meanwhile, returned to Whitmore Holdings slowly. She began as a board observer, completed conflict reviews, and refused the idea that inheritance automatically made her qualified to lead. "I will not inherit credibility," she told Arthur. "I will earn it." Her first major project became a maternal health initiative serving rural hospitals, nursing programs, and emergency prenatal care. She named the charitable program the Lily Foundation, not because she wanted her daughter to become a brand, but because Lily had reminded her what power was supposed to protect. At the first dedication, Claire stood before doctors, nurses, donors, and families. "The strongest homes are not built from stone or wealth," she said. "They are built by people who choose responsibility even after life gives them reasons to become bitter." Ethan watched from the back with Lily asleep against his shoulder during his scheduled parenting time. He did not approach the microphone. He did not ask the audience to know who he was. Afterward, he returned the baby to Claire beneath a row of young maple trees. "She slept through your entire speech," he said. Claire smiled. A difficult critic. For a moment, they shared the easy warmth of two people who once loved each other well. Then the moment passed without becoming a promise. "Thank you for letting me be her father," Ethan said. Claire shook her head gently. "I didn't give you that. You are her father. What you do with the responsibility is yours." He looked down. "I understand." This time, she believed he was beginning to. Claire never returned to the marriage. Forgiveness, when it came, was something she chose for her own peace, not a key back into her life. Ethan never lost everything. He remained wealthy. His company survived. He was still invited to galas and conferences, but he no longer mistook applause for evidence that the people closest to him felt seen. And Claire discovered that coming home had never meant retreating into privilege. It meant returning to a place where she could become honest again. The 12 Black Rolls-Royces created a headline for one afternoon. The life she built afterward created something quieter: a daughter loved by both parents, employees protected from personal revenge, healthcare expanded for families who would never know her name, and a woman who no longer measured her worth by whether one man recognized it. On Lily's first birthday, the family gathered without press at Whitmore Manor. Ethan arrived with a small wooden music box instead of jewelry. Claire noticed that he asked before posting any photograph, and when she said no, he put his phone away without disappointment. Later, as Lily reached from Claire's arms toward him, Ethan took the child and carried her toward the garden. Arthur watched from the terrace. "Do you regret forgiving him?" he asked. Claire shook her head. "Forgiveness and access are not the same thing. I can release anger and still keep a boundary. And if he becomes the man you once hoped he would be, then Lily will have a better father." Claire smiled. That is a good outcome, even if I am never his wife again. Arthur nodded. It was not the ending newspapers had predicted. There was no remarriage, no public revenge, no billionaire takeover of Ethan's company. There was simply a family reorganized around truth, responsibility, and a child who deserved adults capable of learning. Years later, Lily would not remember the courthouse. She would not remember the convoy. What she would know was that her mother refused humiliation without becoming cruel, and her father learned that remorse mattered only when it became behavior. Some stories end when a marriage breaks. Claire's real story began when she stopped asking another person to confirm her value. Ethan had divorced a pregnant wife he thought needed his 60-day lease extension. 12 Black Rolls-Royces came to take her home. But the fortune he failed to understand was never the cars, the estate, or the Whitmore name. It was the quiet strength of the woman sitting beside him all along.